Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Deadly Dividend, a gripping murder mystery set in Dublin, by David Pearson. Narrated by Roger Clark. Chapter 1. Jesus, Mary, there's someone at the door. Pat turned over and saw that the little green figures on the bedside clock said 2:40. Mary, his wife, continued to sleep, or at least feign sleep, in the bed beside him, as he threw back the blankets and struggled to put on his slippers. "Who the hell can that be at this hour of night?" Pat grumbled. He was up now, and beginning to focus. He went to the bedroom door where his dressing gown was hanging on a hook, and wrapped it hurriedly around himself. Thump, thump. There it was again, a determined effort to wake the household coming from downstairs. "It's probably John after forgetting his keys again," Mary said sleepily from the comfort of the double bed. Pat grunted as he made his way carefully down the steep, narrow stairs in the little terraced house. He took the steps gingerly. His arthritis was at him again, and the last thing he needed was a fall. When he got downstairs, he switched on the lights, which revealed a dark shape on the other side of the glass-panelled front door. Pat opened it just a little, being not quite sure what to expect. "Mr. McKenna," said the tall, lanky Garda standing outside on the footpath. His female colleague, much shorter in stature, looked on silently. "Yes, I'm Pat McKenna. How can I help you?" "May we come in, please, sir?" the female officer said. "Oh, right, yes, sure, come in," Pat said, standing aside and indicating that the two should go into the front room to the left of the narrow hallway. The room was tidy but small, with a slightly tired-looking sofa, an easy chair in front of a tiled fireplace, and a densely patterned floral carpet in autumn colours on the floor. Pat switched on the single light in the room, which was suspended from the centre of the ceiling, and bore a plastic shade that had a good amount of dust accumulated on it. "Sit ye down there," Pat said. The two officers sat on the worn, brown, mock-het-covered sofa, close to the edge of the seat. They didn't want to appear in any way relaxed. "My name is Garda Richard Walsh, and this is my colleague Emily O'Connor," the tall Garda said, removing his cap and gesturing towards his companion. "Can I ask if you have a son called John, Mr. McKenna?" Walsh said. "John? Yes, of course, he's a fine lad." "Can you tell us where he is just now, sir?" "Well, if he's not upstairs in bed, then he's still out with some of his pals. They keep funny hours, you know, these young folks." "I wonder if you could just check upstairs for us, Mr. McKenna," Garda O'Connor said. "Well, right-o, but what's all this about? What's going on?" "If you could just check his room for us, please, Mr. McKenna," O'Connor said. "OK, so. Wait there, then," Pat said rather unnecessarily. He got up from his chair, now feeling apprehensive, and disappeared out the door. The Gardaí could hear the man climbing the stairs slowly. They said nothing but exchanged a knowing glance. When Pat McKenna reappeared, his wife was with him. Introductions were hurriedly exchanged, and then Mary slipped quickly into her normal hospitable role. "Can I get you a cup of tea?" she said. "No thanks, we're grand, Mrs. McKenna. Is John upstairs, then?" the Garda said. "No, he's not in yet. There must be a party on somewhere." "Why'd you want to know about John, anyway?" Pat said. "Well, a young man who we believe may be your son has been injured in town. He's been taken to St. James's," Garda Walsh said. "Oh, dear God Almighty, is he okay? What happened?" Mary said, wringing her hands, her voice now an octave higher. "That's all the information we have for now, Mrs. McKenna, but if you like, we can give you a lift to the hospital," the female officer said. "What happened? And why do you think it's John?" Pat McKenna said. "We found his driving licence in his wallet," Walsh said. "Is he okay, Garda? You haven't said what happened. For God's sake, tell us how he is," Pat said. Best if you just come along with us. Put some clothes on and we'll go. Don't forget your keys so you can get back in." At the hospital, the two Gardaí spoke quietly to the nurse in charge of the accident and emergency admissions desk. The place was jammed with the night's casualties, and there was an associated hubbub of conversations, so the Gardaí were able to talk to the nurse without being overheard. Garda Walsh nodded towards the two elderly parents, who looked worried and distraught as they waited for some news of their eldest child. Then Mary and Pat were shown into a small room and asked to wait. They tried in vain to get some information about their injured son, but none was forthcoming. Finally, the door to the room where Pat and Mary were waiting opened with a flourish, and a young Indian doctor with a white coat and stethoscope around his neck came in. "Mr. and Mrs. McKenna," he said. "Yes, Pat and Mary, that's right," Pat said hopefully, standing up as he did so. "Please, take a seat," the doctor said, gesturing to the rather basic chairs scattered around the small room. "Your son, John, was brought in about 45 minutes ago, and I've been working on him ever since. He was very badly injured, I'm afraid. We did all we could for him, Mr. McKenna, but I'm afraid it was no good. I'm sorry to say we pronounced him dead within the last few minutes. I'm really sorry. Would you like me to get someone to come and stay with you? I'm sorry, but I have to get back. We're very busy tonight." Pat McKenna put his arm around his wife's shoulder as she dissolved into uncontrollable sobbing. After a few minutes the doctor departed and was replaced by a ward sister. "Can we see him?" Pat asked, when she had introduced herself and expressed her sympathy. Yes, of course. Give us a few minutes just to tidy up. I'll come back and get you." Chapter 2. Detective Inspector Aidan Burke had been asleep for just over 2 hours when his iPhone started to vibrate on his bedside table. Despite being in quite a deep sleep, a combination of the vibration and the light from the phone eventually penetrated his slumber, and he reached out from under the covers, groping for the device. "Burke," he croaked. "Inspector Burke, sorry to disturb you, sir. This is Sergeant Doyle. We've had a report of a stabbing in the laneway at the back of Beresford Place. The ambulance has taken the victim up to St. James's, and there are 2 uniformed Gardaí at the scene. They think the lad that was stabbed is in a bad way. He may not make it, so they've requested a senior officer to attend." "Bugger. What time is it anyway?" Burke said. "Just after 2:30, sir." "For fuck's sake." "Okay. Get a couple more men out to help secure the location. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Make sure the scene is preserved. Oh, and have you got forensics out?" "Yes, sir. They're on their way." Burke's mouth felt as if it was full of sand, and he knew his breath stank, almost certainly as a result of the several pints of Guinness and the few Irish whiskies he had imbibed earlier in the night at McGroarty's pub in Crumlin, close to where he lived. Lesser men would still be drunk after such a quantity of alcohol, but Burke was well used to it, and his corpulent form was well able to absorb large amounts of drink on a regular basis, while he remained, apparently, fairly sober. He dressed into the same creased white shirt and crumpled grey suit that he had taken off not long before, and ran warm water over his rugged face in the bathroom before grabbing his keys and leaving the small terraced house that he called home these days. Burke was separated. He had married at the age of 26, but by the time he reached 40, his wife Deirdre had become completely fed up with his constant absence and heavy drinking, and she had kicked him out. Deirdre had retained the family home in the fashionable suburbs of Knocklyon, while he just managed to keep a second mortgage going on the house in Crumlin, which he had bought cheaply in poor repair, the condition of which had not improved much under his care. The early morning traffic heading into town was sparse. It was largely comprised of taxis coming and going to and from the various late bars that were still open, providing a lucrative trade for the night men, as they were known. It only took Burke 12 minutes to get to Beresford Place, where he stopped his Volkswagen Passat in front of the cordon that had been set up by the uniformed Gardaí. "Good morning, sir," the young Garda manning the cordon said, as Burke approached. "Do ye think it is, no? Maybe it's good for you, but not for the poor bugger who's stabbed. What's your name, anyway?" Burke said, gruffly. "Brennan, sir, Dermot Brennan." "Well, Dermot Brennan, I'd better get in here and see what's what, don't you think?" Brennan lifted the tape up high enough to let Burke pass beneath it, glad that the senior officer was moving away. He was clearly in a bad mood. Burke walked down the dark, narrow alleyway behind the shops and pubs that each had rear doors opening onto the fetid lane, overflowing bins and bags of rubbish, carelessly tied up and spilling over, stood at both sides of the little street like tired sentries. A white tent had been erected where the victim had been found, and there were already 2 officers in white scene-of-crime suits bent down, gathering evidence from the floor. Burke recognized one of the men. "Jim, what have we got so far?" "Hello, Aidan. Jesus, you're looking a bit rough. Hard night, was it?" "You're not looking so handy yourself, Jim. Now, what's the story here?" Burke said. "We don't know much yet. A young fella was found by one of the barmen from the pub just here when he was putting out the rubbish. He'd been stabbed, and he was bleeding all over the place. The barman called Store Street, and when the lads got here, they identified the victim as John McKenna from his driving licence. They got the ambulance out, and he was taken off to St. James's, but it doesn't look good. He was well cut up, apparently." "Have we taken a statement from the barman?" "No, that would be your job, Aidan. I'm just trying to get some evidence here." "And what exactly have you got so far?" "Bugger nothing, so far. But we've only been here a few minutes. Give us a bit of time. Though with all the shit around here on the street, I wouldn't get your hopes up too much." Burke left the tent and went to the back door of the bar that was standing ajar, the fog of the place wafting out into the cool morning air. Inside he found 2 men seated at a table with what looked like brandy in front of them. "Which one of you boyos found the lad, then?" Burke said. I did," one of the men volunteered. He was a small, wiry youth, probably no more than 20 or 22 years old, dressed in a black T-shirt and black jeans, with a plastic car dangling around his neck on a lanyard. He had short dark hair, cut tight to the sides of his head, and a tattoo on his left forearm. "What's your name, then?" Burke said, addressing the lad. "Connor Griffin, sir." "Well, Connor, why don't you tell me all about it? And yes, I'd love a drop of brandy just to keep out the cold, don't you know." The second barman jumped up and went behind the bar to fetch a generous measure of the spirit for Burke, who had taken out his pocket-book and pen and was waiting for Griffin to tell his tale. "We'd finished in here, and I was tidying up, getting ready for tomorrow. There was a full bag of rubbish for the bins, so I went out into the lane with it." "What time would this have been?" Burke asked. "Around 1:20. We closed up at 1, and by the time I had the rubbish collected, it would have been about 20 past. It wasn't too busy tonight. The rain kept the crowds away. I had dropped the bag beside our bins and turned to come back in when I saw him. He was just lying there. I knew he was badly hurt, like." "Did he say anything to you?" "Nah, not a word. I went across to him, but he was out of it, just clutching his stomach, and there was a lot of blood. So I came back in here and dialed 999. Didn't I, Colin?" Griffin said. "Yeah, that's right. You were proper pale too, like you'd seen a ghost," the other barman said, taking a good swig of his drink. "Did you see anyone else in the lane, Connor?" "No, no one. Just people passing by at the end of the alley. But they weren't looking or stopping or nothing." "Is there any CCTV outside there?" "Not bloody likely. Sure, wouldn't it be nicked as soon as it was put up? There's nothing like that." "Did you touch the man at all? His clothes or anything?" "No fear. I was scared out of me wits. I never seen anything like that. Was the man that was injured a customer? Had you ever seen him in here at all? No, I never seen him before, honest. Will he be okay? I don't know, Connor. I'm going up to the hospital just now, when we're finished here. Has anything like this ever happened around here that you can remember? No, I don't think so. You hear things and all, but I never seen anything myself, not like that. Right. We'll leave it at that for now. Here, just write your name and address in my notebook. You'll need to come into the station tomorrow and make a statement. Ask for Detective Sergeant Moore. She'll look after it, okay? And thanks for the drink, Burke said, holding up the glass of brandy before draining it in one go. Burke collected his notebook, glancing at the address the barman had written in it. He folded it and put it away, and left again by the same back door. "Well, Jim, anything yet?" he said to Jim Roberts. "Not much, Aidan. A few footprints that might be from the perpetrator's shoes, or maybe not." "What about his phone?" "Haven't found one yet. Maybe the killer took it, or it may be around here somewhere amongst all this crap or in a drain," Jim said, gesturing to the many black refuse sacks piled up in the alleyway. "Any sign of a weapon?" "Not yet. But we haven't emptied the bins. You wouldn't like to lend a hand with that, I presume?" "You presume correctly, Jim. I have to go up to the hospital to see the victim. I leave you to your work, but let me know if you find anything, won't you?" "Yes, of course. Good night. Or should that be good morning?" Chapter 3. Burke drove back up along the quays and round by the front of Trinity College, turning right into Dame Street and on up through Lord Edward Street, Thomas Street, and into the large hospital complex known as St. James's Memorial Hospital at Usher's Island. The sprawling maze of buildings and porter cabins had started life in 1603, when Dublin Corporation purchased the site for a poorhouse. Building on the site didn't actually commence till 100 years later, and while it went through several iterations of different types of infant hospitals from 1703 to the early 20th century, it wasn't until 1921 that it became a recognised and fully functional hospital, then known as St. Kevin's. The name was changed in 1971, and since that time it has become the largest teaching hospital in Ireland, and been chosen for the location of the new National Children's Hospital, completing, as it were, a full circle from its early years. Burke abandoned his car at the main entrance, leaving a Garda sign clearly visible in the front windscreen of his rather dilapidated VW, and went inside in search of the young victim. After a few false starts and a frustrating amount of waiting around which didn't sit easy on the impatient detective, he was introduced to Dr. Patel, the doctor who had attended John McKenna when he was admitted. "What can you tell me about the lad?" Burke asked. They were seated in a small ante-room, where a nurse had managed to produce some quite drinkable coffee for them both. "Just the usual sort of thing, Inspector. He was brought in by ambulance at, 1:57 a.m., bleeding heavily from 2 deep stab wounds to the front of his torso. One of the wounds nicked the pulmonary artery, and I'm afraid from that point on he was doomed. We did all the usual things, but he'd lost a lot of blood, and his heart had stopped, either at the scene or in the ambulance. There was nothing I could do." "I see. And have you any idea what kind of weapon might have been used, Doctor?" "That will be for the post-mortem to discover, Inspector. I just try to keep them alive, and when that doesn't work, the pathologists take over." "Have you had any other stabbings in tonight?" "No, at least not yet, thank God. There's a few bloody noses and black eyes from various punch-ups, but nothing as bad as this," Patel said. "Right. I'd better let you get on. Are there any relatives in for him?" "Yes. His mother and father are in one of the visitors' rooms. The nurse will show you." "Terrific. Thanks, Doc." Burke walked down through what seemed like endless corridors, inhaling the pungent odour of disinfectant and cleaning material, accompanied by a pretty young nurse in a blue uniform. He didn't like hospitals. Eventually they arrived at a door with a frosted glass panel marked J205, and the nurse gestured for Burke to go inside. Pat and Mary McKenna were just sitting beside each other, holding hands, looking down at the floor in a dejected state. They had both been crying and looked pale and drawn. "Mr. and Mrs. McKenna, my name is Detective Inspector Aidan Burke. May I say how sorry I am for your loss? This is a terrible business altogether. Is there anyone that can come in to be with you?" Pat McKenna just shook his head. "I'm sorry to have to trouble you at this time, but if you're up for it, I need to ask you a few questions," Burke said, tentatively. He started with some very basic, easy ones. "Can I ask when you last saw your son, John, isn't it?" "He came home as usual after work yesterday at around 6:30. He lives with us, you know. He's saving up to buy a place with his girlfriend. Mary will surely miss him when he moves out. He's a great help to her these days, especially when she's poorly. Anyway, he had his dinner and then changed his clothes and went out soon after 8. He said he was going into town to meet some mates," Pat McKenna said, having regained some of his composure. "Did he mention any names at all, or where in town he was headed?" "No, but it was probably Fintan and Tom. Those are his best buddies, and they usually hang around together," Mary said. "Does he work with these two?" "Yes, at the bank. They're all in the bank, you know, the big one with its offices on Hatch Street, up beyond the concert hall, opposite the Ivy Gardens." "Do you know these lads' surnames?" Burke said. Mary McKenna looked at her husband, and he replied, "Fintan is Fintan O'Loughlin, and I think Tom is Tom Keogh. Yes, that's it, Keogh. His father owns a garage out on the Nace Road somewhere." "And did John say specifically where he was meeting Tom and Fintan this evening?" Burke said. No, he didn't. I don't know the places that the young folks get to these days. It's all new to me. When I was a young fella, the pubs all closed at 11:30, or 11 in the winter. Now they seem to stay open all night, and the holy hour is gone altogether," McKenna said, referring to the old Dublin licensing laws that saw the pubs closing between 2:30 and 3:30 in the afternoon for many years. "I don't suppose you know where these two friends of John's live, do you?" Burke said. "Tom still lives with his folks up somewhere near Rathfarnham, but Fintan has his own apartment. Over near Grand Canal Dock, I think," Mary McKenna said. "Did John have a car?" Burke said. The reference to their son in the past tense set Mary McKenna off again, so her husband answered. No, he didn't. We don't have any parking at home, and in any case we're so close to everything he didn't need one. Tom has a car, of course, and they used to use his if they needed to go out of town." "Well, thank you both very much. I'll leave you in peace now. Would it be okay if I came around tomorrow and had a quick look in John's bedroom? It might help us sort this out." "Yes, of course, Inspector. Do you think you'll catch whoever did this?" Pat McKenna asked. "I certainly hope so, Mr. McKenna. I really do." Burke thought it was a bit odd that a relatively prosperous young man should still be living at home in his late 20s. When he thought about it a bit more, he said to himself, lads and their mammies. It's always the same. Chapter 4. Burke arrived in the Garda station in central Dublin soon after 9 o'clock in the morning. On the way home during the early hours, he had left a number of voicemails, but badly needed to get some more sleep before he was in any condition to deal with this new case. Detective Sergeant Fiona Moore was at her desk. She had received Burke's voicemail as soon as she turned on her phone at breakfast, and was now busy putting a few pieces of information together to start the investigation. Moore had joined the force some 5 years earlier, with the intention of starting a career and finding a husband, or if not a husband, at least a stable life partner. She had been quite unsuccessful with boys during her teenage years, being a little plump and not terribly good-looking. She had even struggled to find a partner for her Deb's dance in the final year of school, although she eventually managed to snag a spotty youth that no one else wanted. But even he took off about an hour into the party, and she hadn't seen him since. Moore was very close to her mother, and they often discussed her threadbare love life. "What you need, Fee," her mother would say, "is to get into the Guards. Plenty of solid, hard-working men there, and they are good providers too." So Fiona Moore had taken her mother's advice to heart and joined the force with the objective of nabbing one of these fine, upstanding, hard-working providers. Her mother had also helped her to improve her appearance, letting her dark, chestnut-coloured hair grow, and getting her to lose several pounds, so that now she presented a better prospect. She had succeeded quite early on in attracting the attention of an older member of the force, and they became romantically involved. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to Fiona, the man was already married with 3 children, and in any case was transferred to Cork after some questions arose about the disappearance of a number of valuable electrical items that were the proceeds of a robbery. Fiona viewed this as a significant setback, but was still undeterred in her quest, although she also had to admit that the work was more appealing than she had imagined, and she now quite enjoyed her job as a detective sergeant. Not that working alongside Aidan Burke was easy. She kept reassuring herself that at just 28 years of age she was in no danger of being left on the shelf, and after her first early experience she was in no hurry to start another relationship that might end in tears. "Morning, sir," she said. "Is it? Bloody thing had me up half the night. What have you got so far, if anything?" Burke said. "Well, not much, but I've started logging names. You know, the lads from the bar, the victims' friends, and so on. We need all of the lads' known associates, though, to complete the picture." "And? We wouldn't be that lucky," Moore replied. "It's all bollocks anyway. Come on, get your jacket. We're going out." Moore knew better than to question her boss when he was in this kind of humour. They got on well, despite the fact that they had very different personalities and worked in very different ways. Somehow the unlikely mixture worked, and they were known for getting results, even if it was often by unconventional means. On the way down to the car, Moore asked, "Where are we going, boss?" "You'll see. I'm driving." Burke drove through the busy city streets where the morning rush hour was just subsiding into the normal nightmare of Dublin's traffic. Dublin's thoroughfares hadn't been widened since Victorian times, and since then the volume of cars, buses, lorries, and bicycles had multiplied 100-fold or more. Then the City Council decided to introduce quality bus corridors, where only buses and taxis could legitimately drive. That was before cycle lanes became fashionable, and once they were installed, many arteries were reduced to just 1 lane for cars. The coup de grace had been the installation of hundreds of sets of traffic lights at every intersection, and even some where there was no apparent reason for them, making sure that motorists' progress through the town was normally slower than walking pace. Burke cursed as they edged along until they got to Earlsfort Terrace, where things improved somewhat. He turned into Hatch Street and pulled the car up outside the offices of the National Bank, stopping on double yellow lines, and the pair got out. They entered the impressive edifice through a rotating glass door, and were almost immediately confronted by a bank of desks, where 3 receptionists and a rather burly security guard with a shaved head and a mean-looking expression were posted. "Good morning, sir," the first girl said, ignoring Moore completely. "How can I help you?" "I need to see whoever's in charge of John McKenna. I understand he works here." "I'm sorry, sir. We couldn't possibly give out that sort of information. It's against our security policy," the girl said frostily. Moore noticed that the security guard had perked up, perhaps in anticipation of some action to punctuate his boring day. Burke produced his warrant card, leaned over the desk, and...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?